ending, but a range of endings where you really give meaning to the entire game by what you choose to do there. I think any of these endings is a completely valid and canonical depiction of the character of Horatio. That is, I think it is as consistent with his actions throughout the course of the game for him to join with Metromind, for him to jump off the tower, and I don't want to tell you what all the endings are if you haven't found them all, but there are a bunch of them. And they are designed to reflect the fact that all game long, Horatio has been exposed to a variety of philosophical views and a variety of approaches to resolving problems. And the choices that are available to him at the end each embody one of those ideals that's been presented to him throughout the game. And so it is kind of a role-playing opportunity for the player. And it's also an interpretive opportunity. You know, the player is basically acting as the co-author at that moment and deciding how to interpret Horatio's character. I want to say a little bit more about Clarity and about some of the other influences that helped shape that character. One of the strong influences on her was the judge that I worked for just after graduating from law school, and she's now died. Her name was Pamela Reimer. She was a federal appellate judge in California. Basically, I think regarded as one of the best judges on the bench. She was someone who had dedicated her entire life to the law. She had no family. She had very few outside activities. She really spent, all the waking hours of the day working on cases, trying to get them decided the right way, and not the way that she necessarily wanted them to come out. She, like Clarity, although she wasn't the kind of exaggerated character that Clarity is, really cared about following the rules and not just following her own preferences. She taught me a lot about what it means to be a lawyer, from a philosophical standpoint and also from a skills standpoint. Like Clarity, she also had some tremendous moral courage, also physical courage, but just the ability to do what she believed was right, even in the face of questioning from other people. The other influence, which is equally sentimental, is that when I was in law school and I was working on the law review and we were trying to figure out whether we should take steps to bring more women onto the law review, at the time I had just gotten married, and I suggested that we should take such steps because someday I might have daughters and I thought it would be important for them to have professional role models in their lives. As it turns out, now several years later, I do have two daughters, and part of what I was trying to do with Clarity is create not a perfect role model because she has a lot of shortcomings, but a strong woman who's strong but is also an intellectual and a professional. She's not just a gunslinger, although she certainly slings a gun. She's also sort of intellectually, in some ways, one of the more sophisticated characters you meet in the game. So that's just a little bit more about her character. But having built her up as this strong, heroic, sort of white knight character, it made it all the more important, frankly, to have her die in the game. And the reason why is that part of the theme of Primordia is that there are no easy solutions to the problem. And so the fact that ultimately Clarity is unable to defeat Scraper was something that was important to me.
Go ahead.
I can climb up these.
Okay, so you're up on the top of the tower in Metropole. It's definitely one of my favorite areas of Metropole. I just kind of like how the colors and the shapes and just how everything sort of works together up here. A couple of people have pointed out or asked if I was influenced by that scene in Blade Runner. You know, the one where the spinner comes down to the top of the building. I think it's Deckard's apartment or something. Is it Deckard? Am I thinking of the adventure game Blade Runner or the movie Blade Runner? They just get mixed up now. I have no idea. But yeah, I mean, Sid Mead himself, who was the art guy for Blade Runner, has been a huge influence on me throughout my life. But this screen in particular, I was kind of thinking of a screen in The Curse of Monkey Island, I think it is, where you're at the top of a lighthouse and you've got this kind of 3-point perspective with the ground receding down into tiny nothingness below and stuff. And I think I was thinking about that screen when I painted this. There's a lot of different movies that kind of influenced me, even some strange ones like Hardware, a kind of B horror sci-fi movie with killer robots and stuff. And a lot of brown sand dunes that probably had quite a lot to do with the influence. Also one called Enemy Mine. It's a kind of sort of a favorite of mine. Kind of the underworks look came from that movie a bit. There's like a pool of greenish kind of fluid or water there on this planet where this guy crash lands. Yeah, so definitely some visual influence there.
Hi, this is Dave Gilbert, the head CEO, whatever, of Wadjedi Games. You have activated commentary.
Hey, I'm Mark.
Hello?
Hey, this...
You didn't really think that was gonna work again, did you? But no. Let's try it again. Cause that talk good.
Primordia is very unique compared to the other Wadjedi games in that it had a full team. It had a dedicated writer, a dedicated artist, a dedicated programmer, and a dedicated composer. Normally you have one or two people doing many different things, which means that some of the other aspects of it kind of get fallen by the wayside, but not so with this one. You had Nathaniel completely focused on music, Mark completely focused on writing, so they didn't get distracted by any other aspect, and so each individual part of it really shined. So the end result is something really special and really awesome.
I really like this room. It's the color scheme I came up with for this background basically influenced the rest of Primordia. I really want to keep the color palette for Primordia pretty, I'll say cohesive. A lot of people will probably say samey or boring or dull or whatever. But yeah, I just liked sepia tones and stuff, and that kind of color scheme of corroded copper deck plating and kind of a rusty sky, grey clouds. Just, I don't know, worked for me, and I used it in a lot of other places. As you journey through the game, the color palette shifts quite a lot depending on the mood and where you're at and stuff, but it kind of sticks to the same thing. I kind of think of Primordia as a painting. It sounds weird, but in some ways I just think of all the art for Primordia as being one work of art, and I don't like it to change all that much in tone, really. I just wanted the whole thing to feel cohesive, and I like backgrounds that look like this, and I wanted basically the whole game to be filled with backgrounds that I liked looking at and stuff, so that's how that came about. The telescope deck, probably my favorite background in the whole game. It's the first one I ever designed for Primordia when I was doing pre-production sketches and getting thumbnails done for some of the places I wanted to show in the dunes and stuff. My first piece of art for Primordia was just a map of the Unique leading up to Metropole, basically, and I had a few landmarks in there. I think Goliath's head was in there. That was just an idea I came up with while sketching this map thing. I'm like, oh, I'll do a buried robot and put a head in there. And I think Mark kind of worked from that and created basically the whole Goliath area, which is has some of my favorite backgrounds in the game. So that was really a good way to go. I think I mentioned this elsewhere in the commentary, but originally Goliath's head was the first background I painted up for Primordia, but it didn't look so great, and Mark wanted a different kind of style for it. And that's how we got the current design there, which I really like. It turned out way better than the first one I had, so that was a definite win there. But yeah, telescope deck. I really like this room. It's the color scheme I came up with for this background basically influenced the rest of Primordia. I really want to keep the color palette for Primordia pretty, I'll say cohesive. A lot of people will probably say samey or boring or dull or whatever. But yeah, I just liked sepia tones and stuff, and that kind of color scheme of...
One case of executive meddling, and I'm sure I'm going to be talking about more of them, was that I asked them to cut down this introductory scene. It used to be a lot longer. Horatio and Crispin talked about humanism, they talked about Metropole, they talked about the world and themselves, and I asked if that could be cut down. Because you'll learn all about that stuff anyway, very shortly, in a much more efficient way. And there's no reason to overload the player with all that information right away. I think the goal of introductory dialogue is to give you just enough information to tell you who you are, where you are, and what you're doing, and leave the rest up to the player. You want to make this world inviting enough to explore, and this world is beautiful enough that you'll want to do that. Logan Cunningham, who plays Horatio, needs no introduction, especially if you're familiar with indie games and a game called Bastion, which won 1,000 awards and is really well known for the narration. A character named Rux does the narration, and that was narrated by Logan Cunningham. And that game basically is known for his voice. And I was introduced to Logan through Sarah Almale, who plays Clarity. For our previous game, Resonance, I needed a guy who could do that kind of low, gruff voice and who could sound natural at the same time. And she recommended Logan. She said, would you be interested in working with him? And of course, knowing his work on Bastion, I leapt at the chance. And he was so great to work with on Resonance that I knew that he was the guy to play Horatio. And I brought him in, I think, 2 or 3 times, getting different auditions each time, and sending it to the Primordia team and saying, I am going to bring this guy in as often as it takes for me to convince you that this is the guy. And it didn't take that many times, but they liked him, and so he ended up being cast in the part, and I thought he was wonderful. When we released Gemini Rue in early 2012, it was such a success and did so well that I thought it would be a good idea to try publishing other games, Gemini Rue being a game that we had just published, we didn't write ourselves. So I looked around for other games that showed a lot of promise, but where the developers might not have had the experience or the time or the motivation to get it finished and get it out. And we found 3. We found Icebox's Denu Guys, we found Vince 12's Resonance, and Wormwood's Primordia. And that's how we got involved with them. And what really attracted me to this game was the art style. It is just one of the most uniquely visual games on our roster. I like to say that its art style is different because it actually has one. The art in this game tells half of the story. The old gritty mechanical structure and devices, the complete blasted wasteland, it tells half the story, and it creates most of the atmosphere and feeling you get when playing the game, and that's what really attracted me to this in the first place.
But I know by your works.
Fuck. The last page. Get in the game.
Man's creation. That a robot is well.
When I was a kid living in DC, my parents took me out to this incredibly creepy sculpture that's a giant man buried in the ground. There's like an arm coming up, a scowling, almost shouting, bearded face, part of a leg. Anyway, it's called The Awakening. And for years it gave me nightmares, even though I realized that it wasn't actually a giant waking up. I still had these ideas like maybe it was an actually buried statue rather than just the parts of it having been built above ground. and it just generally troubled me. So when Vic's original vision statement called for a giant buried robot, immediately I thought back to The Awakening and had this idea that we would do something similar with a robot, only he would still be alive and capable of waking up, like the giant that used to give me nightmares as a kid. So one thing that's very funny, this is one of the last commentary tracks I'm recording, and at several points during this commentary I've talked about science fiction influences, about movies like WALL-E or games like Machinarium, where someone inevitably would draw a comparison to Primordia, and we were asked about that in a bunch of interviews. I gave answers there, and all of a sudden it just occurred to me, just as I'm about to wrap this up, that almost certainly on a subconscious level, Star Wars has to be operating as an influence here. I mean, the first third of Star Wars or whatever, or at least a big part of it, is two robots, one big one and one small one, wandering about in a desert, slowly breaking down, running out of power and stuff like that. Never would I say it had a conscious influence on me, but, you know, I think Star Wars, like Shakespeare or the Bible or any number of other things, is just such a towering work in terms of its influence on any nerdy person, at least, doing anything creative, that it must have had a role here.
You know, boss, if we had the gospel, maybe you and Leopold could bond over it.
You got a bit of your Long Island in there.
Did I? Bond? Boss?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck it. After all the years I've spent trying to cut it out.
Boss, how in the world are we?
3 segments of Gordium conduit. 4 segments of Gordium conduit. I feel like the Count.
Yeah, four segments.
5 of them.
Hi, this is Dave Gilbert, the head.
Hey,
Factories, smelters. Ooh, Bassad.
Sorry. I'm getting, it's like I got like a corncob pipe and a bandana around my neck all of a sudden.
Corncob pipe and a bandana.
Yeah, you know, just incongruous and stupid. Doesn't go together. It makes no sense, but it's there.
Name's Leo.
Leopold Steeple-Built. Let me say that fast one time. Leopold Steeple-Built. Okay, there we go.
Ha! Your risk inhibitor flaking on you, Tyro.
It's like your risk inhibitor flaking on you?
Oh, it's a question? Yeah. It's a question, Daryl. Honor the punctuation.
Just ignore him. Ever since his last megacycle trade-in with Metromine, his processor can't manage a language subroutine.
Wow, I'm impressed you did that all in one.
Me too. I was like, I got that all at once. It was kind of clean. I was shocked.
That actually sounded really good, man. You did that cold. That was pretty good.
All right, one more time, but now it's ruined. Write all weird shit like that from now on, and I'll just breeze through it. Oh, but I will never read a line that clean again.
Greetings, system user. Please state your query.
Greetings, system user. What do you want?
Is advised that conversation will terminate upon answer. Instruct this unit when you wish to proceed. Save your game here if you don't have a question.
Fine. Put me down for another megacycle.
It's a map of train line. It's a map of...
Well, boss.
I need the council code. I need the council code. It's council code is hard to say. Yeah. Council code.
Hey, boss, that repair... I can't...
I can't say...
Stop that! Stop that! That was a robot burp. Metromon cracked his cokes and reset them. Cokes. He cracked his cokes.
Crispin, but I'm just...
Am I the one wandering across the entire city, whingering about a power core?
It's whinging.
Whinging. Sorry. Shit.
Can I try again?
No.
Can I try again?
No. Sorry, I was just messing around on that one.
Adieu, adieu. Remember me.
Hopefully he will like that take because it sounds like Bender going, "Remember me" from Futurama.
To rust with both you thieves! I almost said feeds. Feeds?
I am waiting.
When you look back at old school adventure games, one thing that they have that is actually quite uncommon in newer games is just a lot of empty space. Rooms that you go through that don't have puzzles in them, don't have characters in them, and really have no significance. If you look at like Quest for Glory, particularly the Sierra games, essentially any of the Sierra games, they have a lot of these filler rooms. That was something that Vic kept wanting to have in the game, and maybe he's talked about that in his commentary, but we just didn't have the time or resources to do. This room here is one of the few rooms where there's just nothing that matters about this room. You know, it's useful that this room exists because 187th comes out of it at a later point. But there's no puzzles here. There's no way to get the sad robot his bus. There are no items to pick up. It's just a beautiful scene with a beautiful piece of music that Nathaniel did and this kind of creepy, sad robot waiting for his bus.